We felt like we took responsibility for it, and also we felt like we did the right thing in addressing it as quickly as possible.
When Alaska Airlines referred to the man on the tail as our Eskimo, there was some pushback. It also spawned a debate about the use of the word Eskimo.
Nowadays, people are more thoughtful about how they'd like to be referred to.
Coming up on Frontiers, a look at the history behind the name that is burned into the American consciousness.
Sponsorship for Frontiers with Rhonda McBride is provided by Kupik Corporation and Spinard Builders Supply. Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief the best is yet to come, bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to our program. On this show, we venture into the frontiers of language and culture, which can be difficult to navigate. At least that's what Alaska Airlines found out when it got caught up in two different debates over its longtime logo. You're looking at what could be the most famous face in Alaska.
It makes me proud that it is part of the history of Alaska. I think they should keep it because it's been there for a long time.
25 years to be exact.
Good girl.
Gisela Harris and her canine companion
Come on, Lily.
fly far and wide on Alaska Airlines.
Whenever I see it, when I travel down to the lower 48, East Coast, West Coast, anywhere else, and I see Alaska Airlines logo, I smile because that's my home.
As iconic as this man is, the company felt he needed a makeover along with the airline's overall look.
Who is the face on the tail?
This promotional video was designed to build anticipation for the facelift. The ad playfully stirs up an old debate about whether this face belongs to a real man. Some say it's Chester Sevick of Kotzebue. Others believe it's Oliver Amowuk from Unalakleet. What the airline did not expect, outrage over one little word, the hour, in Meet Our Eskimo. The controversy made a huge splash on social media, including a petition drive that took the airline to task for racism. Even the London Daily Mail had an article about how Alaska Natives took offense. The company issued an immediate apology and changed the wording to meet the Eskimo.
What I appreciate is how quickly people are quick to say, thank you for responding.
What's the teachable moment in all of this?
Probably that words matter.
It kind of smacks of a sort of a plantation mentality.
Although Willie Hensley believes that the airline never intended to say this, he does see how it might have come across that way to a younger generation of natives.
People's kind of perceptions change over time.
Rewind to 1988, when Hensley served in the legislature at a time when Alaska Airlines planned to remove the Eskimo icon from its planes. The late Senator Tim Kelly, who sponsored a bill Hensley backed, said it may not be the best representation of an Eskimo, but it's our Eskimo. Alaskans feel it's their airline. Back then, the word our was a call for unity.
Because we wanted the airline to maintain their Alaskan roots. And what's more Alaskan than the Eskimo?
It's our in a very almost personal way, like family.
Marilyn Romano says Alaska Airlines spent almost 2 years vetting plans to modernize its image and sought help from Native leaders to talk about what Alaska Airlines views as a shared legacy.
It's where we got our beginning. I mean, it's who we are as a company. It kind of goes to the fabric of who we are.
But the controversy over the word our spawned yet another debate about whether the company's use of the word Eskimo is disrespectful. What does that image mean to you? What is it a symbol of?
His image, for me, it means strength, honor, respect.
Romano says it's rare for a company to use a face for its logo, but the man on the tail, even when sporting a Hawaiian lei, works his magic.
So it gives a company a personality, it gives a company a soul.
I'm Helvi Sandvik. I'm from the village of Kayana. I'm an Eskimo, and I'm proud of it.
Sandvik is of Inupiat and Scandinavian heritage and was one of those the airline consulted.
We want the Eskimo on the tail. You know, there's a lot of pride associated with the logo Alaska Airlines chose to adopt, and we called him the Eskimo.
The word Eskimo was emblazoned on the nation's consciousness in the 1930s. And even though it is not a word in any Alaska Native language, it still has a mystique.
The Eskimos, white men, and the whale. See? How can you escape it, man?
Hensley says today it's considered more respectful to use a native culture's name for itself.
The Inupiat, of course, among humans, are the real people, the real good people.
Hensley talks about Alaska's many native groups in this video, which plays at the Alaska Airlines baggage claim. It usually goes unnoticed, as do these displays in which you will not find the word Eskimo. No doubt about it, the word Eskimo has lots of baggage.
He's an image. He can change, he can evolve, and so can possibly the way that we refer to him.
Eskimo, a word that means many things to many people, yesterday, today, and perhaps tomorrow. Alaska Airlines has committed to having more conversations in the community about its trademark image. And joining us now, Tiffany Tutiakov, who is with Northwest Strategies, an advertising company, and you were one of the people that was sort of driving the internet rebellion over this. But maybe tell us a little bit why it engaged you so much.
Well, when the rollout happened, I think we're all used to the Eskimo on the tail, and we all really understand that that is, at this point, Alaska Airlines intellectual property. However, with cultural appropriation being such a hot button issue right now, I was really shocked and offended at the insensitivity and the carelessness of the rollout, especially with the message, meet our Eskimo. It wasn't so much about the Eskimo piece for me personally, it was this sense of ownership.
Why is that sort of outdated? Because some people say you can interpret that we're embracing you. We don't own you, but we just want to call you ours because we love you. But why do we have to be careful?
Well, I think that in Alaska, and especially with all of the issues that are going on now, again, referring to cultural appropriation and ownership of a people, and we talk about the younger generation really wanting to identify who they are. They don't want to be owned, and they don't want their culture propagated.
Well, one of the things, too, was, just the grease lightning on the internet that this subject took off with. Did that surprise you?
No, it didn't surprise me at all. I mean, in Alaska, we have 85% of Alaskans who are online have at least one social media account. And we know we have several Twitter users, several Facebook users, and people talk. And these days, the consumer drives the brand.
Well, one thing I do want to say is, the CEO of Alaska Airlines apologized. And I think that's a pretty big deal. He said, "We are immediately taking down this reference and pledge that we will work to be both respectful and fully cognizant of the importance of this symbol to the native people of Alaska." I mean, does that help?
That's great. I was really pleased at his immediate response. However, I do think as a company with that much presence, in the United States and in the airline industry, and with what money they probably backed that rebranding campaign, that could have been a commitment at the beginning, not at the end.
Well, finally here, I asked this to Marilyn Romano. What is the teachable moment here? For you, what's that?
the teachable moment for me really is to do your research. You know, great, they talked to a handful of Alaska Native leaders, but what about the rest of Alaska? You know, they really should have consulted with more people and done some message testing.
Well, it shows you that you can never do enough homework, maybe. All right. Well, thank you very much, Tiffany Tudiakoff. Well, up next, the history behind the name. Even though the word Eskimo persists in so many organizations, some want to put that word to rest. We'll hear what a native educator and an anthropological linguist have to say about that when we come back.
The Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium provides comprehensive health services for Alaska Native and American Indian people across our state. In addition to world-class care at the Alaska Native Medical Center, our work delivers health services for rural Alaska. From cutting-edge technology for the best care possible, to modern construction of clean water systems and health clinics, to health training and outreach that honors our culture, our vision is that Alaska Native people are the healthiest people in the world.
I just want cremation.
No hidden costs, no add-ons.
Cremation is much more affordable.
Dignified, ecological.
I just want something basic. The simpler, the better.
Cremation sure makes a lot of sense. The Cremation Society of Alaska is now serving families in Anchorage and in the Valley, and we are always on the web at alaskacremation.com. Call us today at 277-2777 or in the Valley 373-8627.
If you're a community volunteer, we need you.
It's the Alaska Mission of Mercy.
For 2 days in April, thousands of underserved Alaskans will have access to free dental care.
This is a big event.
We need hundreds of volunteers. You don't have to be a dentist to help.
I'll be helping the patients in line.
I'm helping set up the dental clinic.
I'll be there to run errands.
I'll help with the paperwork.
We're going to help thousands of Alaskans.
We need volunteers like you.
Sign up now at akmom.org.
It'll make you smile.
We did it to honor the men and women who served our country. People were very pleased with what we did. I think they were happy that we did it in a respectful way, in a way that really truly showed what these men and women did during World War II and Vietnam and Korea. It was interesting to see their attitudes. They were just regular people, but they were war heroes, and that's what we tried to bring out with that. It was such a great experience for us, and I hope it was for them too.
Many in the Arctic would prefer to be called Inuit rather than Eskimo, especially Canadians who find the word offensive.
They are so proud that they call themselves simply the men. We in turn call these people Eskimos, meaning eaters of raw flesh.
Now what you just saw was from the 1960 film Savage Innocence, in which Anthony Quinn starred as Inuk the Eskimo. The film was riddled with misconceptions, including its definition of Eskimo. And joining us now to tell us the story behind the name, we have Paul Ontaguk, who teaches at UAA's College of Education, and Roy Mitchell, who is an anthropological linguist and also a researcher for the state of Alaska who works with the Alaska Native Language Preservation and Advisory Council. Well, Roy, let's start with you. What's the misconception about what the word means, Eskimo?
Well, many people have the misconception that the word Eskimo originally means eaters of raw meat. And part of the reason this misconception is so popular is it was that way in Webster's dictionary falsely for over a century. Turns out it comes from a Eastern Canadian Indian word in the Montagnais language, meaning netters of snowshoes, that is, people who net their snowshoes well. And it was used by them to refer to the Micmac, what we in English call the Micmac, a neighboring Indian tribe. That term, Eskimo, got picked up either by Basque whalers or early French explorers and extended to Labrador Inuit and then into English and picked up and used by them in Greenland, Canada, and then when Captain Cook came to Alaska in 1778, he used it for what we call Alaskan Eskimos and Aleutians, calling all of them Eskimos.
It's a long history. Well, Paul, now you're from Nome, and the term Eskimo is common there as a self-identifier. How do you use the word?
I'm fine with it, especially if it's generational. It works in ways that none of the substitutes that have been put forward quite do for the same groups because it is complicated. So,
like, what about your father and what about you? How do you identify yourself?
well, when my dad was introduced, or when people talked to him for the first time, they'd say, "Oh, you're Eskimo," which was, always positive. We're one of the positive groups internationally. And he would say, "Yes, I'm Eskimo, I'm Inupiat," which was a nice way for him to say, "I'm not offended. It's more tone than term that matters, but I prefer Inupiat." And people got that. They would say, "Oh, Inupiat."
So where did the negative connotation come from with the Canadians? Because it seems like Canadians find it offensive, and that's sort of spreading around. The younger generation says, we want to be Inuit, not Eskimo.
I was really surprised when I taught at Simon Fraser how emphatic people were about not using the term Eskimo. And I said, well, then what do we use? And they said, well, we prefer First Nations. And that was when I first heard the term First Nations for a cultural group, a tribal group. And to me, to be honest, it still sounds like a bank when I first hear it. So it's something that I have to adapt to. It's a generational change.
Gotten comfortable with it. But Roy, how did this whole divide start with the Inuit versus Eskimo?
Well, Inuit is an authentic term, and if that's appropriate, that's what people should use. In Canada, in the late 60s, a number of Southern Canadian, Euro-Canadian whites, school teachers in the Arctic taught their Inuit students that the word Eskimo should be offensive to them because it means eaters of raw meat, and you should be embarrassed or ashamed that people are referencing that. And I find that ironic. It doesn't mean eaters of raw meat, and in fact, what place is it for outsiders to tell people they should be embarrassed about traditional cuisine, like guac? Nonetheless, it came to have that negative connotation by the 70s in Canada, and it works great. So the word Eskimo in Canada got replaced with Inuk for the singular, Inuit for the plural, and Inuktitut for the language, and that works great there. But here in Alaska, we have Inuit or Inupiat, but we also have Yupiks, we have Chupik, we have Chupich, and there really is no other term handy in English to refer to all of these people other than this ironically
well, I think
term.
One of the divisions in people that are promoting Inuit is they're saying that Native people should be recognized by the name that they use for themselves, and of course Eskimo is not that name. Is this going to be hard to change for those people that are pushing the Inuit concept instead of Eskimo?
That's a really good question, and what I see is it's in play. The term Inuit for Eskimo is being tried out. So we have the Inuit Circumpolar Council as an example. Here in Alaska, we've kind of played with First Alaskans is a takeoff of First Nations from Canada.
First Alaskans Institute.
Yeah.
Well, now we have some images for you of logos with lots of the use of the word Eskimo. Look at the Alaska Federation of Natives, Eskimo, Indian, Aleut. And of course, none of those are the names that those cultures have for themselves. They're names that came from somewhere else.
But adopted by a generation. And the term Alaska Native is in play as a confusing term anyway, because people will say, well, I'm Native Alaskan, I was born in Alaska, so I should be able to use the Alaska Native Hospital. And that's evidence of how confused Native Alaskan is, which means born in Alaska, versus Alaska Native, which is the cultural and tribal groups. And when people interchange those, both terms just turn into a mess, which we see today.
Well, Roy, do you find people, especially in Anchorage urban areas, using the term Alaska Native rather than identifying themselves by their cultural group?
It is the case, yeah. You could say that Alaska Native has come to be a new ethnic group, particularly in places like Anchorage and Seattle.
Why?
Well, in part it's because, except for the Dena'ina people who are native to this locale, they are from somewhere else in Alaska. Furthermore, in Anchorage, they're more likely to have parents who are perhaps, one is from Point Hope and the other might be from Fort Yukon. So they
kind of a Romeo and Juliet thing.
Yeah. So it's just simpler to use this term, but it is a new term. Alaska Native was not an ethnic group or an ethnic label 100 years ago.
So we see this in other cultures, this sort of evolution of terms. Why?
Well, it's in part, I think, a generational thing that occurs. So within another community, the African American or Black community, we still have the NAACP, which
National Association of Colored People, which I don't think I could imagine referring to someone who's African American as colored.
Unless you're 80 years old or older, at which case most people will give a person a pass for using it, but it's certainly a dated term, but it's captured by the organizational name. And that might be a part of what's going on with AFN. It might be a generational issue as well.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the debate over the our Eskimo. You're a linguist, Roy. Boy, words do trip us up, and they have double meanings sometimes.
They do. The word our could have other kinds of connotations. I would not have chosen to use it there because it does sound very, very parochial. They should have said something like meet Alaska's Eskimo and just let it slide at that.
What do you think?
I encountered it in a way that's uncomfortable. When I was a new teacher, I was the first certified secondary teacher in the school district I started in, and teachers in the teachers' lounge and principals, some of them still use the term, well, the Eskimos in my village, or my Eskimos wouldn't do that, or they're better than that. And I was just surprised that the term was still being in play or still being used. But I think, again, it was a generational issue.
Well, sometimes it's sort of unintentional. You're using my or our to embrace, to say, I identify with you. Can you talk a little bit about how we unintentionally step in doo-doo sometimes?
Well, I think a part of it is that it concerns me that one of the takeaways might be that Alaska Airlines will say, well, we're just not going to deal with this again. We're going to just not have that image or ever use any term about Alaska Native groups. And I think that would be a loss for them and a loss for us in a way. I'd like us to be identified explicitly as a great part of being in Alaska.
Well, I think that was what the airline was trying to do. But I guess, sometimes things come out. And maybe, for you, what's the teachable moment in this?
Well, I hope one of the takeaways is that it's clear that it would have helped to have talked maybe across generations, as well as with Alaska Native leaders who, as a whole, tend to be older than the overall population of Alaska Natives.
All right, well, I want to thank you very much, Paul Ontaguk and Roy Mitchell, for helping us understand a little bit more about this debate. Well, coming up, John Sturgeon in Juneau. Lawmakers are taking a keen interest in this Alaska moose hunters battle that went all the way to the highest court in the land.
We have a story of 27 families that put 18 months of their lives into building a village, a home for themselves and their future. Our Inupiat culture goes back thousands of years, carried by a strong sense of community. Our relationship with our natural surroundings is at the heart of our culture. By investing in future generations through development that is balanced with the love of our land, the Kupi Corporation brings together traditions of the past with visions of the future.
KTVA 11 News and Sylvan Learning Center proudly present KTVA's Teacher of the Week to Charlotte Smurthwaite, the choir director at Diamond High School in Anchorage. If you know an educator you'd like to nominate, just head to our Facebook page or ktva.com.
Congratulations to Charlotte from KTVA News and Sylvan Learning Center. Ace your next report card with Sylvan.
We taught him how to hit a baseball, how to hit a receiver,
the strike zone, the net. You taught him how to hit the upper corner. You even taught him how to hit the open man. But how much time have you spent teaching him what not to hit?
Your husband is expressing symptoms of radiation poisoning.
Is he gonna be okay?
There's nothing else we can do.
A new Madam Secretary, then.
Very manly.
The Good Wife will go down in history as one of TV's best shows.
Exactly what we wanted.
Ever.
Let's crack open the green notebook. That's serious notes.
Just listen. My breathing. The Good Wife final season continues after a new Madam Secretary CBS tonight.
Last month, we devoted an entire show to a moose hunter who took his fight against the National Park Service all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Well, Sturgeon was in Juneau this week to give lawmakers an update, and as Liz Raines reports, he received a warm welcome.
John Sturgeon, the Alaskan suing the federal government over land use rights, got a standing ovation from legislators in the Capitol this week. Sturgeon came to give lawmakers an update on his case on the same day Senator Lisa Murkowski gave her annual speech to the legislature. Senator Murkowski took a moment to acknowledge Sturgeon in the audience Wednesday morning.
John's one of my heroes because not only is he a stand-up guy, but he stood up. He stood up to the federal government when he believed that they were wrong, when he knew that they were wrong, when he knew that they were overstepping.
In his presentation to lawmakers Wednesday afternoon, Sturgeon highlighted the hundreds of thousands of dollars he spent on his case so far and that the state of Alaska has contributed $0 towards it. For Frontiers, I'm Liz Raines in Juneau.
And you can find our Frontiers program about Sturgeon's case on the Frontiers section of KTVA.com. Well, next week, when it comes to Musher Didi Jeanreau, how much can one person take?
Jogging with me this summer.
Jeanreau lost her home during the Sockeye wildfire this summer. Then came the death of her mother, and soon afterwards, her major sponsor, Shell, pulled back its support after leaving Alaska. But none of that is stopping Didi from getting to the start line of this year's Iditarod. The story of Didi's journey on the comeback trail next Sunday. Well, from personal frontiers to those that we share, like this show's debate over the power of words, we hope we've left you with some food for thought. Thanks for being part of our weekly conversation, and we'll see you next week.